Today's show is sponsored by Ravello. Having a hard time hiring engineers? Ravello lets you sidestep the competitive U.S. talent market by helping you hire skilled remote engineers in Latin America. They provide full-time senior engineers with 5+ years of experience who are embedded in your team like a normal hire. Ravello is an end-to-end solution that handles sourcing, vetting, hiring, payroll, and compliance. They also don't force you to pay for things you don't want, like a project manager. You can interview any engineer before deciding. All engineers are proficient in English and have high time zone alignment with US-based teams. You don't have that painful 24-hour turnaround where you have a question for an engineer who is on the other side of the world. Check out Ravello today. Go to ravello.com/cloudcast. Check it out. That's REVELO.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And as I hit record on this, it is getting to be mid-June. And this is our Sunday show. No Brian with the Sunday Perspectives this week. As we've probably mentioned once or twice on the show before, we've been very fortunate. We have a pretty good backlog of shows right now and some awesome guests and a lot of them actually suggested by you as well. So please keep them coming. And as a reminder, if you didn't already know, reach out to us on Twitter or send us an email, show@thecloudcast.net as well if you have any ideas for shows, and we'll certainly get back to you and try and get some things scheduled. As we work through this backlog, we are doing some Sunday shows as regular shows instead of Sunday Perspectives, and that is going to be one this week as well. But I just also wanted to mention, instead of like a full Cloud News of the Week, when I did Cloud News of the Week earlier this week, there was some kind of spillover, if you will. There were some articles I didn't get to. So if you get a chance, go look at the show notes, go click on the Cloud News of the Week link, which takes you to our Google Doc that we keep updated with things that we think are interesting. And I'll additional highlight one. There were some earnings that you may want to dig through for HashiCorp in particular. But there is one additional one I wanted to highlight this week. That is the API Developer Weekly newsletter run by James Higginbotham and Keith Casey. I've been a subscriber to it for years now. And I always find the links that are in there very informative and very useful as well. So I put the link in Cloud News of the Week one more time. And Cloudcast alumni, shout out to the both of them. They're great guys. So with that, just an extra plug for them this week. And coming up right after the break, we're going to have Priyanka over at Google Cloud talking about how to use creative visualization to convey complex cloud topics.
Datadog is a SaaS cloud monitoring and security platform that enables full-stack observability for modern infrastructure and applications at any scale, providing teams dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, UX monitoring, security monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform, plus 450 plus out-of-the-box integrations with technologies including cloud providers, databases, and web servers. Aggregate all your data into one platform for seamless correlation, enabling teams to troubleshoot and collaborate together in one place, preventing downtime and enhancing performance and reliability. Get started with a free 14-day trial by visiting datadog.com/cloudcast. That's datadog.com/cloudcast.
Still using SSH keys, RDP logins, and database credentials? It's time to access your infrastructure like it's no longer 1999. StrongDM is the only modern infrastructure access platform. It creates a seamless, secure, and observable air gap between your staff and the critical infrastructure that powers your company. Instantly revoke access to every database, Kubernetes cluster, or server with a click. Automatically log every query, SSH, and kube control command to know who did what, when, and where across your stack. Eliminate credentials from end-user workflows to deploy access that's zero trust and least privilege by default. Trusted by your peers at Peloton, SoFi, Yext, and Chime. StrongDM is the only way to deploy secure access controls in a way folks love to use. But who believes an ad? Check it out for yourself with a no BS demo. Sign up at www.strongdm.com/get-a-demo.
And we're back. And, folks, for anybody who's followed the show for a while, you know that both Aaron and I are in the industry in a space in which our job, fundamentally boils down to go learn a bunch of technologies and in some way, shape, or form, try and communicate that with our customers, with our partners, with the industry. And, as you know, we cover a lot of different technologies and we cover a lot in this show, but, just on a day-to-day basis, we might be covering infrastructure technologies or security or something around, data and AI and ML and trying to communicate those things to people is complicated. Sometimes you find that, the people that you're working with they want to get really deep in the weeds. They want to see, a demo and other things. But other times, the best tool that you can use to communicate with people is something visual, right? Paint a picture for them, tell a story. And one of the folks that is, in my opinion, somebody who I absolutely love to follow on Twitter, and I think maybe is the best, if not one of the best people at really communicating complex ideas, is Priyanka Vergadia, who is staff developer advocate at Google Cloud and really kind of chief communications officer over at Google Cloud. Priyanka, really excited to have you on the show. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. I am, thank you for that introduction. It was absolutely amazing. And I'm very humbled and honored to be on the Cloudcast. I've been following the podcast for quite some time. You guys bring in such an amazing set of people and knowledge. So very, very, very happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. I, as I mentioned, one of the things that is I'm on any given day, I'll be scrolling through Twitter and I'm looking for things, I'm looking for information, I'm looking for trends and so forth. And one of the things that always catches my eye is anything visual that comes up in my Twitter feed. And as I mentioned, your way of representing information, of representing technology is, to me, incredibly. It simplifies complicated things. It's colorful. It's fun to watch. Before we dive into kind of all the things that you do to make things easier to learn, give us a little bit of your background, because obviously, you're at Google. You work on a lot of different things. You're involved with a lot of technologies. But give us some background, and then ultimately, kind of what you focus on these days at Google.
Yeah. Okay. So. My background at Google has been, and it's not just at Google. Like I'll start a little bit before Google. Yeah. I worked with customers as a sales engineer, solutions architect, cloud customer engineer, sort of different names at different companies. But I worked with customers extensively before I joined Google, and then even at Google, I worked with customers quite a bit, and that process of working with customers is just teaches you how to present information, and you evolve your own process of how would I explain this to this set of people versus that set of people. Yep. If you are one day you have a customer that has engineers in the room, and the other day you have customers that has C-level executives in the room, and you have to still get the message across. So it's like it teaches you. It for me, that was very enlightening to just learn throughout that 4 to 5 years of experience working directly with customers. So how do you present information so it lands better, depending on who the audience may be, and that translated into like creating content in the form of videos or blogs, or sending them before or after our meetings and things like that. It obviously translates into presentations during the conversation. Sure. that I was having with customers, but it also translates into like, what do you send them after the conversation? Maybe it's a blog, maybe it's an article, maybe you build a demo that you want to showcase to them to see how it will come to life for them. So given all of those experiences coming together, I moved into this role called developer relations or developer advocacy, where but I wanted to take all of that knowledge of what lands great with different audiences and then apply that into more of a broadcast setting, because with developer advocacy, you're basically doing the exact same thing. You're still helping customers, you're still helping developers, but kind of like a large scale than just sitting down with like a set of customers in a specific like setting. So that's sort of my background. I enjoy like solving problems that change like every day. Every customer is different. A challenge that they have is different. So I like the idea, like you mentioned initially as we started this conversation, of like what's happening, what are the trends, and you get to learn all of that and be in the mix of all of that as you're working with the different customers. So yeah, that's my background, and these days, like I mentioned, I'm focusing on creating killer content for the things that developers need to feel comfortable in cloud. Like, what is it that helps them, not just like identify what they're wanting to learn or solve a specific business challenge, but also like how do they do that, and creating content more specifically targeted for that.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on today is you recently published a book, #1 best-selling book called Visualizing Google Cloud. We get a lot of folks who come to us and say, hey, I wrote a book. We just highlighted one a few weeks ago about, kind of playbooks and sort of ways of doing some things in other clouds. The reason I was so in kind of interested in really digging into yours is that, like I said, it sort of speaks to me on a certain level. Like, I've been watching you do this for a while now. I'm really curious, like, what have you found? Like you mentioned that you speak to a lot of different developers. Your job is to help enable developers. Do you find that developers have to be engaged in a lot of different things? They don't have to be experts in a lot of different things, but they have to be engaged in a lot. They have to think about security. They have to think about scalability and business logic. And do you find that of all the ways that you communicate with them, that you try and help them be successful, that this model that you're using in the book, where things are visualized, I don't want to say they're simplified, but they're made very eye-opening. Do you find that approach tends to help, especially with all the different things that developers are tasked with, or trying to learn quickly, or just trying to assimilate?
Yeah, you just hit the most crucial point of like why I wrote this book. And it wasn't in the plans, right? I started with the sketches, and I basically shared them out, and people started to, and they resonated with developers, and there was, and the feedbacks that I was getting at the time was, can we get more of these so I can get through knowing more of Google Cloud and more of cloud technology just faster, right? Because they're just like most people, most developers have to deal with, like you mentioned, security and networking, and the things that they may not need to be focused on to build their application or to deploy their application, but they need to kind of just know a little bit about all the areas to bring everything into the scope of their project. And for those reasons, just having that cursory knowledge of what a specific tool does and how it can help them is helpful. So that was the biggest feedback that I'm still getting and was getting at the time when I just started to do the sketches. It's like, this is helping me quickly get through the topics that I would probably have to read 200 pages of documentation, or just go find other resources, or watch an entire 1 hour talk to learn that. But this I can just skim through, or put it on a coffee table and just go through 2 pages at a time, and I don't have to really read the whole book, because it can be consumed like just independent pages and independent chapters.
Yeah. And real quick, because I'm speaking about it as if everybody knows what the book is and they've seen your stuff on Twitter and other places. Like, real quick, give us the Cliff Notes version of what's in Visualizing Google Cloud.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Visualizing Google Cloud is a book that evolved from my passion for art and colors, and I think that in technology we tend to just get very much focused on what we are trying to do and just solving that specific problem, and we forget to focus in most cases on we can do this, we can learn. We can learn something faster, and it can actually be fun if we tell it in a story format. So that's my attempt in Visualizing Google Cloud, basically telling technical stories of cloud in visualized format, through sketches, through some stick figures, trying to have a conversation, and figuring out an architecture for a specific problem. But I do go systematically in 8 chapters and cover different topics of cloud, like networking and storage and data and analytics and infrastructure and machine learning. So it's like if you are somebody who is into very specific, say, networking, you will find a chapter on it that is interesting, and you might know a lot about that. But you have some of these other chapters that you can learn by just skimming through a few pages.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sort of for everybody in cloud, whether you are a machine learning engineer or a networking engineer or a security engineer, you'll find something in there that will resonate with you. Most people who are looking into that book tell me they're either trying to get through the content fast because they are looking to get certified for the cloud, or they're just like trying to gain the knowledge. Like we were talking a few seconds ago about. They're a network engineer, but they need to know a little bit about security because they have to implement this in a project. So that is the perfect audience for the book.
Yeah. No, well, and I think one of the reasons that I'm sort of drawn to it is if we think about, just kind of historically how people learn, and obviously there's different ways that people learn. Some are audio, some are hands-on, but if you think about, kind of in the history of time, in the history of mankind, right? We began with drawing things on rocks and stuff, kind of hieroglyphics and things that were cavemen, drawing stick figures on rocks. And, so many times I tell people when they're trying to explain complicated things, yes, there are people who best work in the, sort of 6-page memo sort of format, but that doesn't tend to scale very well. But if you can draw a picture of it and it's something that you can put, I don't know, as into a PowerPoint or Google Slides, or you can, you can make it such that it can be copied and pasted into something else, and that idea sort of spreads. To me, that's such a powerful thing, especially if you're trying to get across, basic level information, fundamental things that people have to have, and that you want it to spread, and you want it to kind of, get viral, and you don't always need all the words, right? You think about all the things that show up to your house that you have to put together that are really, they're just the diagrams because you can't translate them into every single language. And so, yeah, I think your approach to me, at least from the perspective of, I want to get some core information, I want it to be interesting to watch and so forth, is really powerful. I'm curious, you're at Google. We've had a chance to talk to a lot of Google people over the years. It's a very analytical crowd. It's a very data-driven crowd. Although, Google always does tend to have, fun with colors, and they do some pretty creative things. I'm curious how your approach kind of got accepted, or, what bumps you might have run into within the Google culture as you were doing things in your way of communicating. Did it fly? Did you run into roadblocks? Were people kind of scratching their head? Like, what was the Google reaction to how you were communicating things?
Yeah, great question. So I am I went back to like my roots here. I am a visual learner, visual thinker. I think in pictures before I can put down words for something. So for me, I was finding lack of resources that could help do that. And that was challenging just from my personal perspective as well, because I was learning at the time. This was like 5 years ago. There was not much content out there for specifically Google Cloud. And I was like, okay, I'll just try and see what I can do about this, right? And so this is not when the book started, but this is just like the my ideas and my move into developer relations. And one day I was like, I'm just going to help build some content so that people can learn more about this. And it's because I am finding it hard to find content for this stuff. So that's kind of how I moved into developer relations. And the team that I am in, that it's online content and experiments is what we call it internally. And that's because it is a space where we can experiment with ideas like this and find out what works and doesn't work, and very hard, like very fast-paced environment where we're encouraged to try different things and say, okay, you know what, that worked, and we're not going to do that one again because nobody really cares about this, or the reception wasn't that good, things like that. So it was not. I wouldn't say it was no roadblocks, but the environment is set up to help you try some of these things. And because I'm visual, I just basically was like, it's hard for people to understand the things that haven't happened before. So over the weekend, one of the weekends, I sat down and I said, you know what, I'm just going to create a compute engine sketch the way I would explain it to anybody in the form of images. And so I sat down the entire weekend. I created a sketch and I shared it out with the directors and the teammates, and they were like, we should do this for every single product. I'm like, that's exactly why I created this first one, so everybody can see and visualize what I'm talking about. And from there, like, it was such a no-brainer to get some investments and resources to get put into the idea. So it's, you're right. It's a data-driven, analytics-driven. Like I posted a few of these on social. I wrote a few blogs, preliminary blogs. The one I wrote on Free Code Camp was one of the first blogs on data analytics that had this image in it, and they started to go viral on Twitter and LinkedIn, and that was the proof point in data for us to go back and be like, you know what, we should go do a book about this. People are interested in learning more. The other proof point before I started putting time into the book was the GitHub repository. It's got, I think, like more than 3,000 some stars at this point.
Oh, wow.
And it's like everybody just commenting on there, sending messages that this has helped me clear my certification. I reviewed all my concepts in 2 days with these sketches so I could go take the exam the next day. It's very enlightening to see all of that. And those were the data points that we needed internally to make a solid case of like, we should do this.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's always fun when you sort of introduce a set of people who, are familiar around a certain kind of mindset to open them up to some new ways of thinking about it, new ways of presenting information. I mean, the other thing I'll say is, the things you do, I know they're intended to be Google Cloud specific, but the core concepts of them are things that are usable, no matter sort of what your cloud might be, whether it's, something you're building yourself as private, or it's the Google Cloud, or, you're trying to, like you said, sort of get yourself certified for any of these cloud things. And that part of it, I think, is very cool. I'm curious, you probably run into the same thing that we run into. People ask, how do you learn all these things? Because like you said, you've got 80 different chapters. You cover a lot of different services, a lot of topics. How do you go about learning these things such that you know them enough that you can then communicate them in a more concise, clear, sometimes simplified form than the raw technology?
Yeah, I get this question a lot because it's intriguing to a lot of folks. So my approach to this is, and it does cover a lot of topics. I think I did like 101 sketches in there. Um, the and the chapters they start with a generic cloud concept. Every chapter of the 8 chapters, they start with a generic concept, and then they evolve into how Google Cloud does it. And so it's like if you pick up the book and you don't use Google Cloud, that's fine. You'll still get a lot out of it because you have the basic concepts that will be clear. Like just an example of like what type of storage to use in an application.
Right.
That a concept applies everywhere, right? So like those types of things I've written it in a way that it applies um, to all clouds, no matter. So going back to your question about how do I learn some of these topics to write about them, I really believe in the idea of like if you don't know much about the topic, and you're intending to build content on it, it kind of sort of helps because what the audience also doesn't know, or how to learn that. So this is how I start, right? I take a topic that I say, let's say I don't know much about. I pick that up. I read a bunch of things. I try. I give it an experiment. I get into the experimentation mode. I would go into Google Cloud, try it. I would, exhaust all the resources
Sure.
that I can to learn that concept. And then I trace back all of my steps, and then I see, okay, if I was to teach this to somebody, how do I may have learned this in like 100 hours, let's say, but how can I save somebody else's time? So if they were trying to do this, and if they were in my shoes when I started, they don't have to spend the 100 hours. How would I distill this information so they can do it in 3 hours instead of 100? I just astronomically reduced that number, but yeah,
Yeah, no, but that's the right mindset, right? I mean, you come at it from the perspective of, I don't know anything. I don't come in with a bunch of kind of predisposed ways of thinking about it, and you're thinking about it from the perspective of somebody who's like, well, what do I really need to know? What's important? I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and that kind of like it sets the stage. Now, like when you're reading something for the first time and you're getting familiarized with it for the first time, you get the most out of that content, and then you have and I point to a bunch of resources like, you know what, if you want to go deeper, here are 4 more things you can go do, but this will set the stage for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. For folks that maybe are finding your things on YouTube or on Twitter and so forth, and they're looking at it and they're going, boy, I'd love to be able to do some stuff like that. That would be cool to do within my company. Like, what tools do you use? What techniques do you use? Are these things that other people could kind of copy, and not necessarily copy your content, but like copy the way that you do it or the tools that you use?
Yeah, so for drawings, there are a few different tools I use, and not everybody is comfortable sketching and drawing, so don't get intimidated by any of this. But like the biggest tool that is being used to create most of these sketches is Adobe Illustrator. I know that is a huge learning curve, and also requires you to know a little bit about drawing and stuff. So if you're not into that, that's fine. I use this other tool called Canva, and if you haven't heard about it, you should just type canva.com. I use it quite a lot, and it's like a tool where it gives you pre-built like if I'm doing like a super small like comic strip, I would select characters and just type my text in there. So you don't really have to draw anything, but you can communicate your idea in the form of pictures visually. And there are some animation stuff in there as well. So I use Canva a lot for visual communication, and doesn't require any skills in drawing or sketching. So I would use that if you're interested in just starting out. And if you are somebody who likes to draw and sketch and things like that, then Adobe Illustrator would be great. I also use Procreate on my iPad to draw stuff. So those are some of the tools that I usually use. But yeah, I think I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think sometimes people just sort of want to know, okay, what do you use? I can go figure them out or figure out what works for them. Last question, because I know you're busy. I'll wrap up. Any tips about just, that you've learned, in those 100-hour processes of how to communicate complex ideas? Is it, is there a way to start? Is there, do you think about them as, sort of a story? Is there a main character? What are some of the tips that, for other people that are like, oh man, we're trying to kick off a project, or I'm having to, teach a class internally or whatever, like any tips you've learned about how to do this well? Because obviously you do it very well.
Yeah. So some of my tips are, think about it from, everything can be distilled into either a flowchart or it doesn't have to be art, right? It can just, all the information that you've got. If you're proposing a project and you want people to buy in on it, I would start with what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? What will it bring to the table if it's accomplished? And just start and putting those pillars into a visual format. So wherever you're going to present it, it needs to be such that your audience doesn't have to read a lot of text, because your focus is to get, if it's for a project, you're trying to get a buy-in. If it's for somebody to understand why they should use a specific piece of technology, it even then, you probably don't want to. I hate to admit this, but I do not like reading white papers. Right? It can be dull. It's very dull. I mean, I'm not saying they're not useful. It's just that I would rather pick a different medium if the same information was given to me in a visual format. And most people are visual thinkers. So just think about whatever your idea is, your concept is, in the form of a story. If I was telling this to somebody, would a character make sense? So in the book, you'll see in some of the sketches, like in the Kubernetes one, I've used a character that's taking you through the story. In some of the other stories, I'm like, okay, you know what? The character doesn't make sense here. I'm just going to create a comparison table of different databases. The databases one is in a comparison table. So it's pick the format that makes sense for the content and for the idea. But in most cases, if you're pitching something to somebody or getting somebody to do a specific thing or adopt a specific technology, then you just resort to a flowchart type thing. Yeah. Take a napkin, write some pieces of okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If you can distill it for yourself, you can surely distill it in that meeting or to somebody. But I also realized that if I can't draw a flowchart myself, I am missing pieces that I need to learn. Yeah. And then I go back and learn about that, and then I come back and finish my flowchart. So that it kind of also helps solidify the idea that there are pieces or missing links that you also haven't figured out, and you can those gaps can be filled once you've started putting things down visually.
Yeah. No, and that makes a ton of sense. And again, I think you highlight a couple of really important things. One of them is not everything has to be explained the same way. Sometimes, certain things make sense. And I think the other one is, and I've heard it explained a lot of different ways, but it basically boils down to if you can't explain something complex to somebody in a couple of minutes or explain it to them as if they're a 10-year-old or whatever, then yeah, you're right. You don't know it well enough yet, right? You haven't distilled it down to its most important parts. And I think that's a a really good lesson for people, right? It's easy to sort of know the surface level stuff, but to know it at a level of depth and then be able to communicate it is, that it takes a little more work. So, Priyanka, thank you so much for everything today. This has been really fun. It's good to finally meet you in person. Like I said, we've been admiring the stuff that you do for a long time. Folks, we have links in the show notes for how to go find the book, Visualizing Google Cloud. It's on Amazon and all the other places you find the books. Priyanka, any last things you want to kind of pass along to folks in terms of, what you've learned, any insight on the book or feedback you've gotten on the book so far?
The feedback that I've received so far has been absolutely positively overwhelming and amazing. I would love for you to, I'm a huge feedback person. I would love for you to go read it, see what you think about it. My messages are open, so you can always ask questions or tell me a little bit about what you thought about the book. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, folks, like we talk about on the show all the time, we like to cover all sorts of aspects of what we do. And part of that is, not only digging in and learning and getting super deep, but sometimes, looking at how, you are going to go communicate this to the folks you work with. And this is a really good example of that. So we want to thank Priyanka for her time today on behalf of Aaron and myself. We also want to thank all of you for helping us listen to the show, grow the show, tell a friend. Last month, as I think I mentioned maybe last week, largest number of listens and downloads we've had in history. So we're doing something right, but more importantly, we're doing something that you guys appreciate, and obviously you're telling new people. So with that, we're going to wrap it up, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.